Cameron has unveiled what he's calling one of the biggest transfers of powers in the history of Welsh devolution. It follows months of political talks. The so-called St David's Day Agreement offers Welsh control of fracking and many energy schemes such as wind farms. A guaranteed minimum funding to the Welsh Government. The UK Government claims that clears the way for a referendum on Welsh income tax. Welsh control over speed limits and other transport issues. A possible voting age of 16 for Assembly elections, and the option for the Assembly to call itself a Parliament, with control over its own elections and constituencies. Well, our political editor Adrian Masters has been looking at what the decision will mean for the people of Wales.
The Millennium Stadium had seen bigger crowds.
Clearly it's not a sellout, but this is an important event.
And this was a different kind of team on the pitch. The coalition government making one of its last big announcements.
This actually today is good evidence of the fact that in spite of political differences and the bumps and scrapes of coalition, actually we put aside those differences and deliver good policy and sensible reform for the United Kingdom. We've seen extraordinary acts of devolution to Scotland and now to Wales.
Of course there are things where I would like to go further on policing and youth justice, for instance, but that's not something which is subject to consensus. This is a consensual approach.
And they went their separate ways. It's thought that this was the last joint appearance by the two men who stepped into the Downing Street garden 5 years ago. The Prime Minister was off to make an electioneering speech to his party's Welsh conference.
Out of the ashes of the Great Recession, a new Wales is being born.
And a Wales, he says, should be ready to vote for the Welsh Government to levy income tax.
I think it unlocks the crucial referendum on tax-raising power, so the Welsh Assembly, in my vision, can become an assembly that doesn't just spend money, it has the responsibility for raising it. I think that would be good for the Assembly, good for Welsh politics, good for Wales.
So would you like to have gone further?
No, I think it's the right step that unlocks this crucial referendum. There wasn't, for instance, unanimity and consensus about policing. We've seen a fall in crime in Wales.
This stadium has seen its fair share of unusual partnerships, although today's announcement was probably about the most unlikely. Also unlikely was any prospect of agreement on these matters. Some people think it still is.
We're in Wales the only part of the United Kingdom in devolution terms that has no responsibility over the criminal justice system and policing. Even Guernsey has its own policing system and we're the odd ones out. This was a great opportunity to rectify these anomalies, and it's an opportunity that's been missed.
It is disappointing that after several months of negotiation they haven't managed to come up with a detail about how a fair funding settlement would work for Wales, and not least because the Tories, of course, have cut £1.5 billion out of the Welsh budget over the last 5 years.
The Labour Party are clearly split and dragging their feet on actually giving the Welsh people a say on devolving tax rates. So, in a sense, nothing has changed between the different parties.
David Cameron also called at the Royal Mint to see the new Britannia £2 coin. Whether today was a step to a new Wales and a new Britain will largely depend on who's in power after the election in May. Adrian Masters, ITV News.
Well, large-scale wind farm developments and fracking schemes have been some of the most controversial issues facing some Welsh communities in recent years. So what difference could today's agreement mean for protesters? And what do our 16-year-olds think about a possible new right to vote? Nicola Hendy has been trying to find out.
They are the voters of the future and the people who'll be putting pen to paper by the time these new plans come into play. These students at Porthcawl Comprehensive don't study politics, but they all have an interest in the way that Wales is run. So how much do you guys care about the powers that the Welsh Assembly have got?
I care about it a lot because I think this idea of it being closer to home is more reliable and more resourceful to us in Wales.
I think it's really important that we're represented by our local representatives rather than just doling out all the power to Westminster and hoping that change happens for us in a positive manner.
But positive change is something this protest group in Wrexham are not convinced of. They're against fracking, the process of splitting rock to extract natural gas. And although the Welsh Government have imposed a temporary halt on the process, this group says a devolution of power brings no guarantee.
It's about time that the Welsh Government had its own power, but in the same respect, moratorium is a temporary measure. It's not to say that 6 months down the line that the Welsh Government aren't going to decide to go ahead with fracking.
Whatever the decision, the power will soon rest with Wales, as it will for the sometimes controversial large-scale energy projects like solar parks and wind farms.
What we're seeing is electricity generating infrastructure up to 350 megawatts. Those powers are being devolved, so the Welsh Government will be able to make decisions over lots of particularly renewable energy installations, which has, of course, a bountiful and limitless future.
Just as the Welsh Assembly will be getting more of a say, these students are hoping that they will too. Another power being devolved is the ability to lower the voting age in Assembly elections to 16.
I believe it is important for us at 16 and over to have a vote, just as Scotland lowered their age for the referendum.
You should be able to vote at 16. If you can work, get married, you're pretty much fully independent, you should have a say.
So a call for more power all round. The Welsh Assembly will get it, but these students will just have to wait and see if it gets used. Nicola Hendy, ITV News, Porthcawl.